Hi, it's Makaela here. Thanks for listening to my podcast. What you're about to listen to is an old episode of my podcast, The Midlife Awakening, which has now been replaced with the Deliberately Transformed Woman podcast. You'll still find some golden takeaways in these old episodes, but if you're the type of person who wants to discover and let go of the things that are holding you back in life by busting through fear and procrastination, overcoming imposter syndrome, and stepping into a life that is fulfilling, courageous, and intentional, then my new podcast episodes, starting from episode 21, are the ones you're looking for. Welcome to episode 20 of the Midlife Awakening Podcast with Makaela Moore. Welcome to the Midlife Awakening Podcast. I'm Makaela Moore, your host and certified transformation coach. I'm a 40-something woman who nerds out on brain science and believes every woman should be financially independent. This podcast is for women navigating their midlife who want to learn the secrets to unlocking their brain and freeing themselves from everything that holds them back so they can create lasting change in their lives, because everything is possible. Join me each week for conversations about the midlife and tips and tricks to hack your subconscious brain so you can deliberately transform your life and ultimately create your own financial security. First time here? Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Enjoy! Hello. It has been a few weeks since I've recorded an episode. How are you all? I've actually missed talking to you guys the last few weeks. A lot has been going on over here at Makaela Moore headquarters. Stuff has been brewing and I am in the midst of making some big changes to my business. When I first started my business, I won't lie, it was with a view to providing an additional income for my family and to build up some financial security following that horrid scare we had with Graham's health a couple of years ago. If you haven't heard that story, go back to episode 1 where I spill all the details. But when I started my business, I suddenly realised a passion inside of me that I wasn't actually aware of and had never paid any attention to before. And that's to help other women to create the life they want and to find the career that they dream of and build the financial stability they deserve while helping them find and honour themselves. Back in my corporate and government days of working in senior human resources roles, I was essentially doing most of that without realising that that was my real passion in life. To me, back then, it was a career that I chose because it seemed like a good job to do and a good degree to have. It wasn't until I discovered transformational coaching about 2 years ago that I realised just how much this was my passion in life and my purpose. And then when I started my podcast in August last year, 2019, all I knew at the time was that I wanted to help and teach and coach women to create better lives for themselves, beginning with the tools to unlock their subconscious and deal with all of the situations of life. But I needed more focus, and my business coach told me to niche down and to choose one niche or, one group of women to speak to. So being that I had just turned 47 in the July, and I'd had a moment on my birthday of reflecting upon my life and realizing that I was probably already past the halfway mark of life, it occurred to me that while men have their midlife crisis, so many women I know, they go through a midlife awakening of sorts, because after raising their families and whatnot, it was finally their turn to do something for themselves. And so that's when the Midlife Awakening podcast was born. Except in the first 19 episodes, I hardly talked about the midlife. Yes, I was living it, but I wasn't talking about it. I spoke a lot about subconscious reprogramming and coaching tools and coping with life's curveballs, but they apply to most people, not just the midlife ladies. I spoke of motherhood and business ownership and friendships, relationships, life experiences, and of course, my beloved brain science. But still, I really didn't talk about the midlife. And so a few weeks ago, it dawned on me that I was just not in alignment with my podcast. And I decided to make a few changes to my business and my podcast, because it wasn't just my podcast that was out of alignment. I was also out of alignment with my business and my message to my audience. I know I felt quite lost. I felt like I was floundering, you could say, in the sea of, same coaches all offering the same. And I didn't know, other than teaching and coaching all about unlocking your subconscious brain and all that goes along with coaching, I did not know what set me apart from the others out there, and nobody else did either, which absolutely did nothing for my self-esteem or my public image or my business's bottom line. So some changes had to be made, and it is with great joy, not sadness, that I announce that this is actually the final episode of the Midlife Awakening Podcast, as you know it. So my business is going through some changes as we speak, including a rebranding, and this podcast will have a new name, a new logo, and sort of a new message. The core focus of my new podcast will still be the same great brain hacks, subconscious reprogramming, and tools for dealing with life and overwhelm, stress, insecurity, relationships, and creating the life that you dream of. But it will have a different focus this time around. I'm going to be focusing more heavily on fear and procrastination and all that goes along with those, because as I've come to learn, particularly from my first-hand experience, it's that fear is the number one thing that holds us back in life, and it keeps us in the procrastination cycle, but we just don't even realize that so much of our identity, habits, and patterns are actually fear-based. So I want to talk a lot more about that. But there's also another perspective that I'm going to be bringing to you with my new podcast. See, I've never felt comfortable with being a stay-at-home mum. To be honest, I've never even felt overly maternal. I'm the sort that would much rather spend my day working away in my office than looking after kids all day. And I also firmly believe that raising kids is not the job of the mother, and instead is a partnership with the father or your partner. I also believe that women should not be held back from achieving whatever it is that they want in life because they're raising their family. I believe that in this day and age, we have so many opportunities sitting there waiting for us. They're just waiting for us to grab, just like that bull by both horns. Life is short, life is precious, and life is there to be lived and to do the things that you really want to do. And, if you know your purpose in life is to stay at home and raise your children and look after the household, and that is what you really want to do, then that is awesome that you have found your life's purpose. I will never ever say that there is anything wrong with being a full-time mum or, a stay-at-home mum, but I just know that it's not for me, and I know that there are a lot of other women out there who feel the same, and they're the ones that I'm really speaking to now. I know some of my loyal listeners are full-time mums, and I thank you so much for your support, and you are more than welcome to stick around and keep listening. I would love it if you did. But moving forward, this podcast is now going to have a very heavy focus on the busy working mother, whether she's in a corporate career role or a business owner or an entrepreneur. She's an ambitious, busy woman and mother juggling all the things, But like all of us, she still needs the tools and the strategies and the brain hacks to deal with life, work, and family so that she can continue to create the balanced life that she dreams of while unlocking her greatest gift, which is in each of us, and that is our inner magic, our subconscious. Because if I can match up my beloved brain science and coaching and my former career of human resources with helping women and working mothers, and if I can roll that into one great ball, then I'm going to feel far more in alignment with my business and my podcast and my mission than I ever have before. So without further ado, may I present to you my new podcast name is Deliberately Transformed with Makaela Moore, which I probably should have called the podcast when I originally began, but we live and learn. Some of you may already be familiar with that name because it is my registered business name and it is also the name of my Facebook group. It's so funny, in the last few weeks, I spent hours trying to come up with the new name, writing down random words to try and come up with some brilliant idea. And I remembered back to when I originally brainstormed for my business name of Deliberately Transformed almost 18 months ago. And I had lists upon lists of words and phrases and ideas. And I was wishing that I knew where that list was a few weeks ago so that I could go through it to help me with my new podcast name. And then it dawned on me that I had originally spent days upon days back then coming up with the Deliberately Transformed name and putting so much time and effort and mental energy into it that perhaps I should just use that name as my podcast name. And so I am. So it is. Deliberately Transformed with Makaela Moore. It will also tie in much more cohesively with my Facebook group, which will now be more focused around the podcast content each week. So if you know a busy working mum who could use a little help in lightening her mental load, in overcoming fear, procrastination, overwhelm, judgment, or lack of confidence, or who could benefit from a few brain hacks to get through the day, week, month, and her life, then please share my podcast with your friends and family and tag me on social media. The Midlife Awakening Podcast will always hold a very dear place in my heart naturally, as it was my beginning in the podcasting world. But I am so excited for the future of the Deliberately Transformed with Makaela Moore podcast, for where it will take me, and most of all, the positive impact that it and I will have on your life and all of the other women who tune in each week. The old episodes of the Midlife Awakening will always remain here. So if you're only just finding me, please go back and listen from the start. Regardless of the name of that podcast, the topics are relevant to anybody wanting to make lasting change in their lives. My new podcast, Deliberately Transformed, is still a few weeks away. My family and I are about to embark on a 3 to 4 week road trip in our caravan to a few of the southern states here in Australia. So I'll be launching the new podcast once we have returned after the Easter break. But keep an eye on my Facebook and Instagram accounts for regular doses of brain hacking wisdom, and also if you want to follow along with our road trip. If you want updates on my new podcast sent to your inbox, and if you're not already on my mailing list, then hop on over to www.makaelamore.com/reflection and pop your name and email address in there. As a gift for doing so, you'll also receive a free guide to reflecting on your past year's achievements and projecting forward to the new goals and visions, which actually matches up with episode 15 of the Midlife Awakening. So thank you for listening these last 6 or so months to the Midlife Awakening podcast and listening to me sharing some of my most vulnerable stories. But I have a feeling that in terms of oversharing, I haven't even touched the surface yet, Because as a recovering perfectionist who let fear and procrastination hold me back so much in life, I have so much to say on that topic. So stay tuned. Stay subscribed to this podcast channel because my new podcast will be right here in this very same spot. I'm just going to be changing the name, popping on a new logo, and of course a whole new energy and focus. So thanks for tuning in to this very short episode this week. Thank you again particularly to my loyal listeners, for sticking with me in the Midlife Awakening, even though I didn't talk about the midlife. But I promise you, Deliberately Transformed with Makaela podcast is going to have a whole new energy, a whole new focus, and it'll be raring to go right after the Easter break. So that's all from me this week. I hope you're all well, and I can't wait to see you around the corner in the new podcast. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. And that, my beautiful friends, is another episode of the Midlife Awakening. If you'd like more inspiration or to connect with other midlifers, head on over to my Facebook group, Deliberately Transformed. You'll find the link in the show notes. Until next time, cheers.